Hi, I'm Paul and you join me today in the VIEZU and Paramount Performance workshops. I've been in the motor industry now for, what feels like forever, 35 years, and for the last 24 years I've particularly specialised in tuning, styling and servicing Jaguars. Very recently I've had about 3 Jaguar F-Types, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you today just to talk about some of the things that we see go wrong with these vehicles, and I'm hoping this video might be interesting for people that are looking to buy a Jaguar F-Type, but also if you've got one, and the type of things that might go wrong with it could be quite useful information for you. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this video because there's quite a lot to cover. I'll try and get it through quite quickly, but we'll try and go into as much detail as you need so when you're looking to purchase a vehicle, you're armed with that information up front. So I don't want to teach anybody to suck eggs here, but I want to start with pretty much the basics of how I approach when I want to purchase a new vehicle, the things that I look for even before I go out and see a vehicle. And before I do that, there are 3 main things. So when I find a vehicle, typically online these days, that I think I'm interested in, I want to see 3 things before. The first thing I want to do is a HPI check. Has this car had any accident damage? Is very important for me to know. And is there any outstanding finance too? Of course, is very useful to know. And lastly, from the HPI check, I want to get an indication if the mileage the vehicle is now showing is probably correct. So that's why I do a HPI check. They're not particularly expensive. £10 will get your check done these days and can save you an absolute fortune by flagging various things up. Something else I like to see from the seller is a copy of the service history. Now, I don't mind if he takes a picture and sends that to me, he scans it, however, but I want to have a look through the service history and make sure the mileage is relevant to what I see as the MOT history too. So does it tie up with the vehicle as it now is? Does the service history, is it correct? Has it been serviced at the right time? And does the mileage tie up with the MOT history of that particular vehicle? I don't mind if it's been serviced at a specialist. I like a vehicle generally to be serviced during the warranty period at a main manufacturer. Outside, I understand many customers, including myself, often go to an independent to have their vehicle serviced, but I do like to see, if possible, that they've used genuine Jaguar parts. And then the other thing I like to see is the MOT history of a vehicle. Not just the most recent MOT, but actually the past MOTs as well. Now, if you're watching this from outside of the UK, you might not be quite sure what I'm talking about, an MOT. It's the Ministry of Transport yearly fitness test. So this is where your vehicle is independently assessed to make sure it's safe to use on the road. Now, during this inspection, as well as either passing or failing the vehicle, the inspector will make comments about the vehicle. And this might be that an item is worn or tired. It's still okay to pass the MOT. For example, if you've got some rust on the chassis, it's still okay to pass the MOT. It's still safe to use, but it's an observation that this problem is there. Now, if you look at the MOT history in detail, it can open up all sorts of interesting things you might want to know if you're looking to purchase a vehicle. So worn tyres, worn brakes, worn suspension, rust and other corrosions and things like that that you do want to know about, and it might give you an indication perhaps why the vehicle is up for sale in the first place. So look at these 3 things, might save your journey out to go and look at a vehicle, get your HPI check done, look at the service history and look at the MOT history, and my golden rules before even starting to waste your time to go out and look at a vehicle. So if you've decided the vehicle is good enough to go and see, it's time obviously to start the inspection. Now again, this is fairly general information of how I like to approach inspecting a vehicle. This isn't specific to an F-Type, of course, but we have a vehicle here. This is our F-Type Predator 2, and I'm going to use this as a little bit of an example. One of the things I want to be looking at to see really if this vehicle's possibly ever had any accident damage. So when you see the vehicle and it is the colour you want and it is the trim that you want, it's really easy to get excited. The price is right and your emotions can get quite high. Park your emotions. This is a business purchase in your mind. Leave the emotions at home. You need to look at this vehicle like you're buying it for somebody else, like you're buying it for your great-grandmother. So park those emotions and let's take a sensible look at this vehicle. I like to get down and look down all the panels on the vehicle. I want to look for any dents, any kinks, and I also want to look for things like panel alignment. Has this vehicle possibly had any accident damage at any time? Does the doors open and close right? Are these shuts all right? Now, if it's got a couple of nicks and dents and things, that doesn't stop you buying it, of course, but it is an opportunity to have a haggle with the customer. One thing I will say about the F-Type is some of the panel alignment isn't great from the factory, particularly on the bonnet. These gaps sometimes can be quite uneven. If you see that, it's not necessarily an indication of an accident. It might be something you want to have a closer look at, but it's not unusual for them to not be great. But do look for things like overspray inside the doors, so any paint on any rubber trims, any rough paint on door shuts or anything like that where there's a bit of overspray. Make sure the paint is nice and flat and shiny across all the panels. Look for any dips or dents that could be hiding filler, any rough overspray or orange peel paint that doesn't look like it came from the factory might require further investigation. Take your time and have a good look around the whole vehicle. When you actually go out to look at the vehicle, also ask the seller not to start it. You want to be inspecting a vehicle with a cold engine and gearbox. We're going to take it on road test later on, but you do want to hear it from cold. So other than that, I say look around the bodywork, make sure the panels are all nice and aligned, paintwork is looking good. And if you're happy with all of that, start looking a little bit deeper at things like tyre tread. These tyres, you can easily spend £1,000 on a set of F-Type tyres. You're not going to not buy a car because it's got worn tyres, but it's going to come into the haggle. But one thing you do also want to check, as well as the tyre tread, is are the tyres wearing evenly? If you've got a lot of wear on one side of the tyre or another, or the wear is particularly uneven, could be an indication the tyre geometry is out, and you might need to get that checked as well. So do check the tyres with some depth, and also look for the quality of tyres as well. If it's got very, very cheap winter tyres or remolds, these might be something you want to replace, and it might be a bill that you're not necessarily expecting, having just bought a car. And it also gives you an indication of the current owners, the way they look after their car. Someone that's put very cheap budget tyres on their car might have scrimped in other places too. A good quality premium brand tyre is always a good sign the car's been looked after. Now, these are aftermarket wheels, of course, on this car, but it's the same for most of the Jaguar wheels. They are quite open, and it gives you a good chance to look in and see the brake. So if you can, get in, have a look at the brake pads and the brake discs. You're looking for excessive wear. A set of brake pads on disc on this car, fitted at a main dealer, easily £1,000, possibly a little bit more. And an aftermarket specialist, you're still probably going to be spending £500 or £600 on a set of brakes. So knowing that they don't need doing is a good thing, and if they do, again, it's something you want to get into the haggle, because you don't want to be buying a car and immediately start running into repair bills. And whilst I'm down here looking at the wheels, most of these Jaguar F-Types run 20-inch wheels. They are lovely, but they can be a little bit soft. They're very susceptible to curb damage. Again, you're not going to not buy the car because it's got a curved wheel, but it's something you might want to have a haggle about. But they also do buckle quite easily, particularly with our lovely potholed roads that we have here in the UK. So when you do road test it, you want to be feeling for any vibration coming through the steering, front or back, and that might give you an indication. Could just be a tyre out of balance, could be a buckle that could cost you quite a lot more. So just be aware they are a little bit soft and do buckle on some of these poor roads that we have. Now, the F-Type comes with 3 engines. Initially it was a V6 and a V8, and later a 2-litre turbocharged engine was introduced. And on the whole, all of the engines are incredibly reliable. The V8s and the V6s are very, very strong engines, capable of holding great power even when tuned. But there are a few weaknesses on them that I do need to cover with you, and this is going to get quite deep, and it's going to get quite deep quite quickly, so you might want to grab a pen and paper, grab a coffee if you need to, but there are some important issues I need to talk to you. Now, I do not want to put you off buying an F-Type. Generally, they're incredibly reliable. I've had 3. I've never had a failure of any nature, actually, but there are reported failures, and there are some issues with this engine that I need to cover. And actually, there's 4 categories I need to cover here. The first one is water leaks. Both the V6 and the V8 engine do tend to suffer from water leaks, and it can be a real problem too. The water leaks tend to come from 3 main areas. First of all, on the early vehicles, actually, the water pumps were particularly weak, and we saw quite a lot of water pumps fail. Now, the problem with these is it's incredibly difficult to see these. First of all, the bonnet is at the front, which is the water pump is under here, so you can't really get a good look in, but do try, because you can see the water pump. It is just down here, and you're looking for any powdery white residues underneath the water pump that could indicate there's a water leak there. On the later vehicles, the pump is a bit better. I think it's been superseded with a new part number, but the pipe that goes to the back of the water pump leaks, and that's a real pain because that's underneath the supercharger, and the only way to get to that is to take the supercharger off. And whilst we're there, I've got some other bad news for you. The biggest water leak on this engine, the biggest problem in fact with this engine, is this. This is called the Y pipe, and it's made out of 2 different parts. This one fits down under here underneath the supercharger and connects to this pipe here on the top. So that part there connects to this part here. But you can't get to this part with the supercharger in place. And the early versions of this part, and I'm talking about right up to 2020, these pipes with mileage get brittle, and the plastic goes hard and it splits and it breaks, and that can cause catastrophic failure. Sometimes these pipes leak just a little bit and they weep over a long period of time and then suddenly go. In other cases we've seen, they can go from no leak at all to complete failure. It's difficult to diagnose this, and it's very difficult if you're looking to purchase a vehicle to see this pipe, to see if it's even been changed, and certainly to see if it's been leaking. So it's not particularly easy to give you good advice of how you can tackle this. What I would say is if you are looking to purchase an F-Type that's done over 50,000 miles, it's 6 or 7 years old, you do need to ask the seller, has the Y pipe been changed? If he says it has not, or he can't prove that it has, he's got no paperwork to say that it's been changed, bank on wanting to do this when you purchase the vehicle. Again, this is not a catastrophic problem. It is quite an expensive repair. It costs you about £800 to do here in the UK. But if you're purchasing a vehicle of that age, I would suggest you want to build that into your haggle price, because once you purchase this vehicle, if this pipe has not been changed, you probably want to consider getting it done. So it's best to be forewarned with that information, but it's not the easiest thing to inspect necessarily. Another place these vehicles leak from actually is almost in the same place. Underneath the supercharger, there's a throttle cooling pipe that runs from the front of the engine to the back of the engine. It's a small, about an 8mm pipe. Again, you can't see it, and that can leak too. So if you're going out to look at one of these vehicles, do ask the seller of the vehicle if they've had any water leaks in the past, if they've had any repairs done. Obviously the thing to check for to see if you've got a low coolant level indicated on the dashboard, but of course any would-be seller is going to be topping up the coolant, so that's not on. But on road test, you often can get at the end of a road test a little bits of steam coming out from around the engine, which would indicate there's possibly a water leak there, and the coolant smells quite strange really. It almost smells like burnt orange juice. It's got like a sweet, sickly smell to it. And when it leaks underneath the supercharger, it sits down onto the engine, and that evaporates and gives you quite a strong, pungent, sort of sweet smell. So if you get a smell like that under the bonnet, you've got any signs of any steam or anything, and you're looking to purchase a vehicle, I'd honestly say at this point, pull up the handbrake on the sale and let's get a professional to look at this. So that's the water leaks covered. And again, I say, I don't want to put you off, but they do tend to suffer from water leaks. Other things that go wrong with this engine: the earlier engines had problems with the timing chain tensioners, and these can go quite weak, and as you get higher mileage too, the chain can stretch a little bit, which again can mean you've got some free play in the chain under both occasions there. And what you'll get with that is a rattle from the front of the engine. It will be a constant rattle, it'll be there all the time, even at idle, and it'll sound like a scrapey, rattly sound. If you've got anything like that, again, you need to get a professional in to look at that. That is a big job to replace this. You're talking many, many hours of labour. So rattling from the front of engine is definitely a problem that you want to get inspected before you purchase the vehicle. Item number 3 that we need to look at: supercharger noise. Generally, these Eaton superchargers are very good, but they do have some problems that can occur on some vehicles, and there's 2 of them. There is a front coupler down at the front here that drives the supercharger. It's not the easiest thing to see. You can't actually see the coupler, of course, because it's inside a metal casing. But that coupler, with mileage, and particularly on vehicles that are driven quite hard, can become quite noisy, and that needs to be changed. The supercharger needs to come off for that too, and you're talking about 6 hours or more labour to do that. What you will hear is when you turn the engine off, you get knock, knock, knock. 3 distinct knocks, sometimes 4, but nearly always 3 distinct knocks. As you shut the engine off, you'll get a continuous knock afterwards, and that would indicate you've almost certainly got too much free play in your coupler. The coupler itself actually is not a particularly expensive item, but it's the labour to take the supercharger off and get to it to change it. So listen when you turn the engine off after your road test. Is there any further noise from the engine other than the engine just shutting down? The other more serious issue with this superchargers is buried under here are 2 sets of bearings at the front of the supercharger, and they can become worn and rattle. And what you will hear as the engine is running is a scraping, rattling sound. It sounds literally like it's coming right from here. It's constant, it's there all the time, and this can be quite a serious problem. These engines should run almost perfectly quiet. When you first start them, you'll get a little bit of like a tapping noise, a little bit like a ticking noise. That should soon quieten down as the oil pressure comes up and the engine warms up. After that, if you've got any sort of scraping, rattling noise or vibrations from these engines, think very carefully about going ahead with the purchase, and my strong recommendation is get somebody to look at this engine and look at the supercharger before you go ahead and purchase it. These main bearings at the front here, Can be reconditioned. It's quite a big job. Once again, the supercharger needs to come off to do them. But if they're left for too long, the blades inside the supercharger can actually have too much contact with each other. That can wear the surface of the supercharger blades, and at that point your supercharger is probably damaged beyond repair. So if you're going out to look at a vehicle and you've got quite a lot of scraping and rattling noise from the engine, you might actually be talking very quickly about a new supercharger, and that's going to cost you about £2,500. So it is something you want to pay some real attention to as you get into underneath the bonnet area of this vehicle and on road tests. And so the last thing I wanted to cover now while we're under the bonnet is to talk about fuel injectors. Now, fuel injectors can fail on any vehicle at any time, and unfortunately they do sometimes fail on the Jaguar F-Types. Slightly complicating it though is that where they are situated can be subject to some water ingress from underneath the bonnet, and this often causes the steel casing of the injectors to corrode against the aluminium head, and quite frankly it can make them incredibly difficult to get out, which can lead to quite a big repair, and in some cases even having the cylinder heads removed to do that. Unfortunately, when you're looking to purchase a vehicle, there's not a lot really to see, because these injectors can fail at any time, and literally they can be absolutely fine today and fail tomorrow, which means it's quite difficult to inspect for. But it is possibly a conversation you want to have with a potential seller of a vehicle. Have the injectors been changed? Other than that, do look for any early signs, and that's quite often a very rich exhaust smell, smelling very heavily of fuel, and often a little bit of white smoke or white or grey smoke as well, even after the vehicle has been warmed up. That could be telltale signs that the injectors are starting to leak, and they can stay in that status for quite a long time. Your fuel consumption becomes a little bit poorer, and the car does smell like it's running rich. Ultimately, sooner or later when they fail, they tend to jam open completely. And at that point, you absolutely know they've failed, because there tends to be plumes of white smoke. The exhaust, in some cases, will literally pour petrol out the back of it. And this is a real problem if you leave it with a leaking injector, because it can do quite a lot of damage. First of all, it can damage the piston itself. Excessive fuel can get down into the exhaust system and damage the catalytic converters, and probably the worst case scenario is too much fuel entering the cylinder can get past the piston rings into the sump, and it dilutes your oil in the sump, so oil becomes very loose, contaminated with too much petrol. It stops lubricating particularly well and causes premature failing of all sorts of engine bearings and other components, ultimately leading to catastrophic failure of the engine. I'll say again, it's difficult to inspect for this, but if you are owning one of these vehicles and at any time you start to see white smoke or a strong smell of fuel from the exhaust system, stop driving the car as soon as possible and get it inspected as soon as possible, because driving it with a leaking injector, and certainly an open injector, can cause a lot of damage very quickly. So that's enough under the bonnet at the moment. I know there's a lot to take in there. If you ever do need any advice, you're always welcome to email us or give us a call, but we'll move on to other parts of the vehicle now that I also want to cover as well. So before we head out on road tests, there are a couple of other things I want to talk about that are specific to the F-Type that can go wrong and things you want to be checking for. The rear diffs can tend to leak oil on these cars. It's not a dramatic repair, but it can be quite expensive. So if you get a chance while you're working your way around the vehicle and have a look, try and get right underneath and have a look at the rear diff. It'll be quite obvious if it's leaking. You'll have quite a damp patch around the diff, and sometimes even literally a drop of oil coming out. That is something you definitely want to be checking for. And while we're at the car, we need to talk quickly about exhaust systems. Two things tend to go wrong with these exhaust systems, and they both involve these little suckers. These are exhaust valves. One of the great features about the F-Type is a switchable exhaust system. So when you want to be a little bit of a hoodlum, you can press a button, open the exhaust flaps, and you get this great exhaust sound. And then when you're trying to tickle home at night, maybe a little bit late and not wanting to upset the neighbours, you can press the button to close the valves, and you can slide in with a much, much quieter exhaust system. It's a fabulous feature, best of both worlds, but these valves can be a little bit troublesome, and they do two things. They can stick open and they can stick closed. They generally stick open. What that means is the exhaust system is loud all the time. So when you're looking at an F-Type and thinking about buying it, the button inside will turn the exhaust on and off. Even at idle, you want to press that button and you want to hear a notable difference in the exhaust tone. If there's no notable difference, the chances are your valve is stuck. If you can, and you're willing to, you can actually get underneath the car from the back. You can find this exhaust valve in the exhaust system itself, and you can physically open and close it. If you're pushing it open and it will not move at all. The chances are this is C solid. A new exhaust system on this car from the manufacturer is really rather expensive, but the valves can be changed. It's a service we offer and a number of other people offer too. You can cut these valves out and change them for new ones, or of course you can go for a whole new sports exhaust system, which will be even louder than stock if that's what you're looking for. But certainly when you're inspecting the vehicle, see if these valves are opening and closing. If they're not, you may have a problem there. And the other thing they can do, believe it or not only do they seize, they go incredibly loose. And then these chatter away and make a really annoying rattle from the back of the car. It will drive you quite insane once you tune into it. So on your road test, listen for any rattles and sort of strange chattery noises from the back of the car. And at the same time, turn the exhaust on and off and make sure you get an audible tone on the exhaust system. Last thing on the exhaust system, catalytic converters. The catalytic converters on these cars tend to last about 8 years or so. Certainly once you get up to 70, 80 odd thousand miles, we find it very common that the cats can fail. The O2 sensors can become very welded in time over into the catalytic converters, and you'll often find that both the cats will need changing and sometimes the O2 sensors too. The thing to do there is check for any fault codes, and we'll cover that in a moment when we're going out on road test. Okay, now here's a really annoying one. I'm hoping Paul, our cameraman, can pick this up, but you can see some scratches on the window here. Now actually this isn't a coincidence, and sadly it's not unusual too. Jaguar have now changed this bottom window seal channel here, and even if the vehicle's out of warranty, I believe you can still get the rubber changed, because what it used to do was catch little stones and bits of grit, and when you put the window down it was causing the windows to become scratched, and it's really common on the early cars. Unfortunately, whilst I believe they will still change the rubber, they don't change your window, and it's really, once you spot it, every time you look at your car you will see it. So when you're looking around the car, just check for any little scratches. You can pick them up on your fingernail, or you'll see them in the sunlight glistening. It's a real annoying thing once you tune in on it. Another thing we want to be checking for is electrical gremlins. These F-types do tend to really stack up the fault codes in the ECU, and a lot of them actually are nothing to worry about at all quite often, but can be triggered by low battery voltage. I find these batteries with the start-stop only last about 5 years, and also if people are using aftermarket diagnostic tools, sometimes it can leave the ECU in a permanently powered up state, which means your battery tends to last only about 2 or 3 weeks at a maximum before it goes flat. So again, if you're looking for a vehicle, it's a 4 or 5 years old, might be worth asking if the battery's been changed. If not, be ready to have that expense, because it's quite likely to come your way soon. And whilst we're here, and we're here in the boot because that's where the battery is, the last thing I wanted to talk about in the boot is water leaks. And this actually can be a real problem. It's something I really want you to take your time and look for when you're inspecting a vehicle. Normally caused by a poor seal on the boot here, and we can get water ingress into the boot area. That itself is annoying, but part of the problem with the F-Type, with the battery in the boot, there's a lot of electronics in the boot. I've seen them literally with 2 or 3 or more inches of water in the boot. It gets into the electrics, it causes corrosion and can be an absolute nightmare. So when you're looking at a vehicle, get the boot open. There's a little tray inside. We want to be removing this and having a good look down here into the electronics. We want to see absolutely no moisture, no wetness at all, and look around the connections and plugs in the boot for any green furriness. When electric connections like this often get wet, they'll start to turn green. That is a sign we definitely want to be tuned into, because if I'm honest, it can be an absolute nightmare tracing these problems, and a lot of damage can occur if you've got water in the boot. So do take your time and look into the boot and make sure it's bone dry. So here we now are on the inside of our F-Type, and it's a lovely cabin, nice and spacious, lots of great features. Take your time to run through them and make sure they're all working well. Do the windows go up and down smoothly? Does the satellite navigation work? Do the heated seats work, etc.? One of the problems that these cars are quite known for is some of the soft touch buttons go sticky. And it affects quite a lot of the soft touch buttons actually, including around the start, stop, and the window buttons as well. And initially you think, oh well, it's just something sticky on there, we can take it off, and you use a bit of white spirit or something, but really what it's a sign of is the plastic is starting to deteriorate, and whilst you can take the stickiness off, it soon comes back, and it looks pretty horrible, it feels pretty horrible, and sooner or later, once this sort of stickiness sets in, you probably need to start getting into changing buttons. They're all available, but it can cost a little bit to do, so just take your time, as I say, look around the buttons, see if any are suffering from this sort of sticky syndrome, and make sure all the other features in the car are working, the electric electric seats, etc., etc. But generally inside, things tend to work very well and don't suffer from many other problems. So one of the last things I want you to inspect before we go out on road test, and this might sound a little bit strange, but I want you to take a good look at the vehicle underneath for rust. Now the bodies on these vehicles are aluminium, so they're always going to look good and generally, of course, don't corrode. And when they're new, they're absolutely fine, but you'll be surprised how quickly rust and corrosion can set in. If you're looking at a vehicle that is sort of 8 years or more older, you're probably going to be quite surprised how much corrosion there can be underneath. We always recommend either lano guarding them or wax oiling them underneath, but it can get in quite quickly, particularly on our UK roads that are salted over the winter. So if you're looking at a slightly older one, take a good look underneath. You want to be looking at suspension components, and particularly the rear subframe and rear differential can get very, very rusty. It's fine if we've caught it early enough, you can treat it, but it is an item you want to be looking at, which is unusual in some ways on a car that you think is so new, and the bodywork often will look so good on, as I say, being aluminium. But take your time and try and get right underneath and understand how corroded the vehicle is. So if you're happy with all the paperwork for the vehicle, you're happy with the bodywork, everything looks right, it looks like a nice straight vehicle, it's probably time to think about next going on road test. Now hopefully the seller of the vehicle has listened to you and the engine is still cold. So the first thing we want to do is start up the engine. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes you'll get a little tappy noise when they first start up. That's nothing to worry about, and it's not uncommon too to get quite a little bit of condensation in the exhaust system. So you see little plumes of condensation, white smoke if you like, coming from the exhaust. That should very quickly clear, and the tapping noise from under the bonnet should very quickly clear too, and you should move to a position where the engine is dead still and purring silently. That's a really good sign. Before we do that, one thing I would like you to do is take some diagnostic fault codes. So you're going to read it with a diagnostic machine. So plug into the OBD port, read off any fault codes are present. Now, these Jaguars do really like to collect fault codes, so don't be alarmed if you get a great big long list of fault codes. It isn't necessarily a serious issue. Quite often they're intermittent codes or temporary codes that can be cleared down and won't necessarily come back. But what I would like you to do is take those codes, make a note of them all, go on your road test, and I'm going to suggest a good long road test. 15 or 20 miles is absolutely ideal. And then re-plug in and recheck for new fault codes. If you've got fault codes that have come back on a road test as short as 15 to 20 miles, the chances are you've got a permanent fault that needs investigating. So that's a really well worth check to do. And honestly, I would never ever buy a Jaguar, or in fact to be honest any modern car, but particularly a Jaguar, without checking for fault codes and understanding what they are and if they're permanent or temporary codes. So as your engine is warming up, take a good walk around, look for too much smoke, smell the exhaust system. I know that sounds crazy, but you're smelling for oil. Any oil or black smoke residue or any over-fueling might be present in the exhaust gases. Listen to the engine. Have that tapping noise stopped? Is the supercharger dead quiet, or have we got any of those rattles or strange noises present? If you're happy with all of that, it's time to actually head out on road test. Take the vehicle out. As I say, we want a nice long road test. During your road test, you want to have the radio off and preferably the air conditioning off at some point too, although you do want to check the air conditioning is working. Turn everything down and have a good listen to that engine as you're driving it. I want you to drive the car hard. I'm not talking about thrashing this car, it is not necessarily your property yet, but do drive it up to the legal speed limit, accelerate hard, and what you want to be feeling for is vibration of the steering wheel at about 60 to 70 miles an hour, and you want to see as you accelerate, does it pull to the left, does it pull to the right perhaps, is the acceleration smooth, are there no bumps or hiccups as it goes through the gears. Try and take it through all the gears quite hard and quite fast. I want you to go into corners in the same way too. Drive into a corner with some enthusiasm, both a left corner and a right corner. We want to be listening for any clonks from the suspension, any strange rubbing noises, and also any wobbliness of uncertainty. As the cars get a little bit older, some of the suspension bushes can wear, these go soft, and the car suddenly starts to feel uncertain on the road, and you will feel that most when you're cornering with some enthusiasm. If the car doesn't feel planted, it's probably something that wants to be investigated, because generally these cars handle like a dream. They feel solid and planted to the road. So if this isn't feeling really like it's going around a corner, like it's on rails, it might be a sign that some of the suspension is getting a little bit old and a little bit tired. In exactly the same way as accelerating hard, I now want you to do the opposite and brake hard. So take the car up to a good high speed, 50, 60 miles an hour, in a legal speed limit, of course, where you're able to do that, and plant your foot on that brake. We're going to check for a couple of things here. We want to make sure there's no pulsing of the brake pedal. That would indicate perhaps the brakes are worn. These cars do often get a hard time. People take them on track days and days like that, and they drive them quite aggressively. The brakes can get quite hot and cause a distortion, and what you'll feel on that is a pulsation of the pedal. That shouldn't be there, so if you've got no pulsation after hard braking, that's a good sign. And also check to see if the car wants to veer to the left or the right when hard braking. Again, that could be a sign of imbalance on the brakes, or again, potentially poor or worn suspension components. So drive it hard, how does it feel? Brake hard, how does it feel? Car wants to feel nice and planted on the road at all times. So after your road test, allow the car to sit and idle. Open the bonnet one more time. Let's have a listen to that engine. Remember, we're looking for any signs of steam or water escaping from the engine anywhere. How does the engine smell? Is it ridiculously hot? How is the temperature gauge in the car during your road test? Take a walk around the back of the car, recheck those exhaust gases, any smoke or something you're not quite expecting to be there. And as I say, is the engine nice and purring away as it should be? Turn the engine off. Replug in your diagnostic fault code reader, check for any codes that have come back. Any codes that have come back, this is likely to be a real issue that's live on the car. I would honestly say at this point, again, pull up the handbrake on the purchase. Let's take some professional advice. Don't just go to Google and the Facebook forums, but actually you probably want to get a professional to inspect this vehicle if you've got fault codes that are present. Don't dismiss them as being simple things that you can clear down. They're there for a reason. So that's the end of the vehicle inspection, and that's the end of the video. I hope you found it interesting. I know there was a lot there to cover, and I hope I didn't rattle through them too quickly, and I hope I haven't bored you to death either. But you know, these cars are packed full of all sorts of goodies and electronics. They are fabulous cars, but as they get older, little things can start to go wrong. So if you're looking to buy one, just take your time, do the checks. If in doubt, get an independent inspection. It's a service we offer here at VIEZU, but people up and down the country will offer this service too. Don't rush into purchasing one, but I hope you do find the right car for you, and I hope you have many, many happy years driving it. I absolutely love them to death. So that's another video from Paramount and VIEZU. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, you can follow us on Facebook and YouTube, and if you've got any questions about tuning, styling or servicing your Jaguar, or if you're looking to purchase one and just want a bit more advice or want to run anything past us, you can find us at info@viezu.com. That's info@viezu.com. I'd love to hear from you, and happy motoring, guys.